Hey skaters, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. I am Coach Julia, and today I have another history lesson for you, this time about the evolution of your figure skates. Long before we were watching Olympians land quadruple rotation jumps on ice, humans were ice skating just to get around. But the style and function of those skates has changed drastically through the years. The size, the shape, and how those skates were made has morphed, as did the reasons why people wear them. Archaeologists have been discovering skates made from bone through Northern Europe and Russia for years, leading scientists to believe that this mode of transport used to be not so much an activity, but a necessity, having to flee from enemies, hunt for food. Ice skating provided quick transport through the frozen waters during the wintertime. A pair pulled from the bottom of a lake in Switzerland, dated back to about 3000 BC, are considered one of the oldest skates ever found. They are made from the leg bones of large animals, with holes bored into each end of the bone, into which leather straps were inserted and used to tie the skates to the foot. It is interesting to note that the Old Dutch word for skate is schenkel, which means leg bone. Unlike today's skates, the bone skates had no sharp edge and were flat and slippery on the bottom. That meant that, unlike what we do today, skaters couldn't push off with their legs. Instead, they stabbed a stick into the ice between their legs to push themselves along. This made turns particularly challenging, as skaters had to slow down and push sideways with the stick. But once they pushed off, it was pretty smooth gliding. Back when these skates were used, bone was actually the best material for making blades, if you can even call them blades. But that's because bones naturally contain fat. And when this oily fat comes in contact with the ice surface, it helps reduce friction, and this produces a smoother glide across the ice surface. In the 13th century, skaters started to ditch the bone idea though, and began making an iron blade. It was still flat across the bottom, but an iron blade that they would mount to a wood block, and this would get strapped to the boot instead. This meant that they had far more control over their movements, but it also meant that the blades didn't glide as smoothly. The change from iron to bone meant that there was an increase in friction with the ice. Still, by the 14th century, iron blade skates supplanted bone skates as the popular style. Around the late 14th century, the Dutch started sharpening the edges of their formerly flat-bottomed iron skates. The introduction of sharpened blades changed the course of skating. This invention now made it possible to actually grip the ice and push themselves without the need of a pole. Skaters could now push and glide with their feet, and the resulting discovery of edges, probably inside edges at first, provided greater speed and a new artistry. This new continuous movement, known as the Dutch roll, became the standard, and you can actually see a skater on these inside edges in this woodcut from 1396. St. Ludwina had fallen on her skates, and you can see a skater coming towards her from the back on their inside edges. As skate makers glided into the 15th century, they began adding a big curlicue to the front of their iron skates. And there's a number of different reasons why they may have done this. First of all, their bone skates would have naturally had a little bit of a curve to the front of it. So it's possible that this was a style they were comfortable with and they wanted to recreate that bone curve on their iron skates. Another possible reason why they would have done this is because it would keep them from tripping. If you have a blade with a square on the front, then you're very likely to get that square tipped into the ice, and so that big curlicue kept them from tripping over the front of their blade. It also helped to cut through snow. So if you're skating in a pond and there's a little snow covering on the top, that curlicue can help push the snow away, something like a snowplow. And of course, that dramatic curl could very likely also have been purely for fashion. You can see that that curlicue is really large. And even with all of the different reasons you might have a curlicue on the front of your skate, only the first couple millimeters are going to actually help you, so the rest of that big curl was purely for fashion. These skates were still made out of iron attached to a wooden base with leather straps that you would tie onto your shoe. You had to be very careful in your pushes to make sure that the blade didn't slip out of position. This remained the skate style for a few hundred years. The next great blade revolution happened in 1848 when a man named E.V. Bushnell from Philadelphia eliminated the wooden footplate and replaced them with metal, resulting in a lighter and stronger skate. These new skates could also clamp directly onto the shoe, eliminating the need for straps. Then in 1854, John Forbes of Nova Scotia designed a metal plate that actually clamped onto the boot using a spring fastener. The metal footplate could now be adjusted with a screw to fit the length of the skater's boot, not just the width. And there was often a leather buckle around the ankle for added security. These new blade designs revolutionized ice skating. It went from a sport where you were always just a little bit worried that you might lose your blade that was tied to your shoe, so you just enjoyed that gliding motion skating forward on the ice, to something that felt much more secure. Your blade was now clamped onto your foot, and you could get more creative. You could do little turns and twists and little leaps. So skating became something that was much more artistic and creative with this new blade design. By the mid-1860s, the father of figure skating, Jackson Haynes, was wearing a skate that had the blade actually mounted to the boot. This was not yet something that any other skaters were doing, and nobody else really was even willing to adopt it. It seemed frivolous to most people to have a pair of boots dedicated purely to ice skating, when most people would use their street shoe and clamp that blade onto it. So to have a boot that had a blade attached seemed like something that was a little bit of a frivolous expense. But Jackson Haynes embraced the idea. His skates were similar to the skates of today, but without toe picks. The blades were connected to a steel plate that was in turn fastened to the boots by screws. Although clamp-on blades remained the norm for the rest of the 1800s, by 1905, booted blades were finally considered a skating essential. By the first Winter Olympics in 1908, all the skaters were wearing blades mounted to their boots, but the blade style still had some developing to do. Blades often were still separated from the boot after the big curved prow. The prow is where we would now consider the toe pick. So the boot would be mounted to the blade under the sole, but as the skate curved up to the toe, it would actually still separate from the rest of the blade. Other designs had the blade connected to the boot at both the front and the back. Some skaters experimented with adding a small serrated section to the curve that allowed them to do toe spins, and there were others who had a small spike added to the front for pivots and such. But toe picks were definitely not standard for figure skaters until about 1920. I actually have a pair of skates made in 1919 from Winchester Gun Company. Yes, they actually did make skates for a while, as crazy as that sounds. So this is a 1919 skate. I just think this is so cool. But you can see here how the blade is quite a different shape than what we're used to now. In fact, it almost looks to me like a hockey blade because it is connected at the front and at the heel, and it has an even curve. It doesn't have that rocker that we're used to, and there's certainly not really any space for a toe pick here. And yet still, this was a very common boot style and blade style in all the way from about 1905 till about 1920. Now, what happened in 1920 that made toe picks go from a novelty that a couple people were experimenting with to a regular thing on everybody's blades? Well, the toe loop jump was invented. In 1920, the toe loop jump was invented by Bruce Mapes, and just like that, the toe pick became standard on every pair of skates. The 1920s saw the invention of a slew of new jumps, including 4 of the standard jumps that we still do today, all because the toe pick was now a commonly accepted addition to the figure skate. By the 1932 Winter Olympics, figure skate blades looked like what we skate on today. A long, straight back of the blade, a curving rocker under the ball of the foot, leading to a toe pick that then connects to the front of the skate. While new technologies of today are making lighter blades with sharper edges, the basic blade shape has stayed consistent for the past 100 years or so. This modern blade style has allowed for an explosion of creativity in figure skating, with blazing fast footwork, challenging spin positions, and incredible athletic jumps. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found the history of figure skate blades as fascinating as I do. If you enjoyed this, then come back next week because I am going to be trying to skate in these skates from 1919. Honestly, I'm just a little tiny bit worried about how that's going to go, but I'm also really curious about how different these blades feel than what I'm used to skating on today. If you enjoyed this, please do give us that thumbs up, and as always, I look forward to reading all your comments in the section down below. If you haven't done so yet, then hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell down in the corner so you can see all my videos when they come out. Happy skating, and I'll see you next time.